Well, good evening and welcome to all of our Mount Horeb area school Vikings. This is a special meeting for all of our Intermediate Center families. We're so grateful that you could join us on this call, especially since we're in the middle of our winter break. Let us start by saying how grateful we are to you that you would take the time to be here with us today, as I know you have many, many things going on in your world right now. And believe it or not, so do we. We're excited to be welcoming back our Intermediate Center students, those families that choose an in-person hybrid option beginning February the 1st, and also to provide some information about how we hope to continue offering our virtual learning plan. Tonight, our goal is to maybe just provide a brief overview as to where we currently stand, as there's still a great deal of work left to go, but an opportunity then to answer any questions you may have. We really value the input of our faculty and staff, and so we anticipate many of the pieces will start to come together once our staff has an opportunity to come back from winter break, and then we really get into the throes of preparing for our students' return. Of course, no question is too small or too silly. We're grateful that you're here on the call tonight. You may notice in the upper right-hand corner of your screen a little chat feature. You'll see a little quotation mark up in the right-hand corner. If you wanted to share your thoughts or share your questions, feel free to do so. Principal Katie Hauge will be monitoring those in a few minutes, and then begin to ask people who are on the call to answer those questions for us. Maybe a good place for us to start is to do some introductions around I guess I'll call it around the table tonight, the virtual table, so to speak. I am so pleased to have my friend and colleague, Katie Hauge, the principal of the Intermediate Center, join our call this evening. We also have with us tonight our Director of Instruction, Sarah Straka. I'm pleased that our Assistant Superintendent for Business and Finance is also on the call. His name is Scott DeYoung. Our Director of Student Services, Brian Johnson, is on the call this evening as well. Brian is instrumental in helping shape questions around IEPs for our young people. And then lastly, I'm pleased that we could also have on the call tonight our Human Resources Coordinator, Sarah Eartham. I'm sure that there's a couple of staff members from the Intermediate Center that are on the call tonight too. That just demonstrates the great advocacy and dedication they have to ensuring that we have a successful launch on February the 1st for our kids. So maybe first things first is maybe we could just provide an update to those folks who are not quite aware yet of where we're at in terms of planning for the students' return, and then our shift to virtual for those families that wish to continue that pathway. We are on track for a February 1st start. We had a wonderful visit with our faculty and staff but a couple of days ago. You may recall back on December the 14th, Public Health Madison-Dane County surprised us all by saying that they did support bringing back students in grades 3 through 12, provided we did so in a way that was progressive in nature. That would take place over a period of time. And while at this point we're preparing for our IC students' return, we also are busily preparing for an announcement very shortly after we get back from winter break about our middle school and our high school students' return. We feel compelled to share that information with our faculty and staff first, and then we will provide time for our family members at the middle school and high school level to prepare for those students' return. And so we are now in the process of trying to determine, based upon the great success we've had with the K-2 model, and that really is a testament to the staff and faculty, the parents, and Principal Rachel Johnson, how we can help support a launch that is reflective of our intermediate center's needs, while at the same time understanding there's a larger system, a larger perspective that needs to be considered. So transportation, school nutrition, and the like, those need to be considered in terms of how we go about ramping up. We are required under Public Health Madison-Dane County's Order number 11 to ensure that we maintain at least 6 feet of physical distancing between our students. And so this very much lends itself to having a cohort A, cohort B model. And we'd like to, because we know many of you have siblings at the younger grade levels, try to have as much as continuity as possible between those two programs. Again, although allowing our friends at the Intermediate Center to have obviously some unique perspective in how they might want to arrange for their schooling experience for their children. Lastly, before I turn it over to Principal Hauge, is just to remind everybody, if you have not done so already, there's an important survey that we need from you in order to help us plan for our students' return. I'm really pleased to say, as a school district, we work very hard to respond to the needs of our families as opposed to having our families respond to our needs. And what I mean by that is by you telling us whether or not you wish to go in an in-person hybrid model, or if you'd like to continue along the all-virtual pathway, we then can begin building our sections and our master schedule for students. We recognize there are several families who have developed some deep, deep relationships with our amazing faculty and staff. And they want to keep the same teacher regardless of what direction the teacher is able to go. And I keep in mind, if you don't mind, please, that it may seem like this is a very easy thing to do. Just have the kids continue working with their teacher. But in some circumstances, there are some staff members who have significant health conditions. And we need to be cognizant of that and be able to, in a very private and professional way, navigate that for the staff member, let alone, like you, maybe having even a loved one in their family right now who's experiencing a major medical health condition that necessitates either some form of accommodation or perhaps maybe a leave. So there's lots of plates spinning on the tips of our fingers, and know that we're going to do everything we can to try to get to a yes on as many facets of this big Sudoku puzzle. And I'm pleased to say we have the very best and brightest around the district to help us with this problem solving, and I count my friend Katie among those. So welcome, Katie. How are you?
I'm doing well, Steve. Thank you. Thanks for that great introduction. And again, I'd like to just echo a thanks to everyone for their time here this evening. I know that between the holidays, there are many, many things going on. And so it's just a testament to this community and our families and our staff, how many of you value education and are just such phenomenal partners to work with. If it's all right with you, Dr. Salerno, I thought I would I put together a couple of slides just reviewing some of the information. And so if I share my screen, is that all right with you? All right. So Dr. Salerno touched on the timeline a little bit, and I wanted to share that as well in case you are trying to keep up with the details. So we opened our family survey on December 20th, right before break, for families to let us know their preferences. And we're needing those responses back by December 30th. As Dr. Salerno pointed out, we are really building our program to what our families tell us they need for their students. And so we need that information so we can put together a strong program there. Our goal is that by January 18th, we'll have our class assignments finalized and be able to communicate that out with families. Where possible, we'll work hard to maintain teacher connections and staff connections, but as Dr. Salerno mentioned as well, there may be some places where we need to make some adjustments. To get ready to launch for our students coming back in person, January 27th, 28th, and 29th, the IC will not have school. And so that means we will not have virtual instruction. So that when February 1st comes, we are ready to meet all of our students' needs, whether that means continuing on with the virtual platform or returning to school in person. If you have not had a chance to take a look at the survey yet, you'll notice that we ask, these are our primary questions. what is your preference? Do you prefer your student to return in person, or do you have a need to remain virtual? We know that families' needs span the spectrum of absolutely needing to come back in person if that's an option, or absolutely needing to stay virtual because of a health concern or other concern. And we've also heard from some families that might not be in either one of those situations and have the flexibility. For them, it's not so much the model, but for them, it's that continuity of student and teacher relationship. And so we included that question in our survey. We learned from the K2 launch that in some cases we had to balance some groups, whether it be on Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday. And so we've also included a question that if we need to make some adjustments in our A through K or L through Z split, do you have some flexibility there? And of course, we also want to know what your needs are related to school breakfast, school lunch, and do you absolutely require transportation? So I know that families are looking for some more information. One of the things we can absolutely tell you is that our plans will center around mitigation, meaning that our students and our staff will all be wearing face coverings. We will be maintaining physical distancing, that 6-foot requirement that Dane County Public Health recommends or requires. The other thing that we've learned is that it's really important to maintain distinct cohorts. So that pod or that group that we establish for students, we're going to maintain those without mixing them with other groups. That we've learned has really been important for contact tracing as well as just the whole program. If a need does pop up, it's just a need for that one group rather than the whole school. Of course, we will develop routines that promote frequent hand washing and plenty of hand sanitizer to go around. We're going to be looking at our materials and eliminating or minimizing shared materials. And we are already frequently disinfecting surfaces that are touched readily throughout the day. The other really key thing to make this all work is whether it's staff or students, that if anyone has symptoms of an illness, we'll need them to self-report and stay home. So with the schedule, what we do know is that students will be coming for full days. And as Dr. Salerno said, across our system, we need to utilize the AA, meaning people with the last names A through K on Monday and Tuesday are coming on the A days, and students with the last name L through Z are coming on Thursday and Friday. That's what really allows us to do our physical distancing that is so important for mitigation. What we also know is there are some things that we want to include to make it a rich school day, despite all the changes that we're working through. That means we're going to keep our 2 recesses per day. We know that students need that break. They need that mask break. They need to get up. They need to move around, get outside, get that fresh air. We also know our staff are committed. They want to provide that well-rounded education. So we're going to make sure we have at least 1 related arts per day. And we also know, again, for the stability of our model, that lunches are going to be with cohorts, meaning we're going to keep our groups from mixing. All right. And so that's some of the information I can share. And I think we're getting ready to open it up to questions that people have. I'll monitor the chat, and Dr. Salerno will be listening for questions that come up through the speaker.
Wonderful job, Katie. As usual, thank you so much for giving this such great thought. There is a chat feature for those of you who just joined us tonight in the upper right-hand corner. Feel free to enter in any questions you might have. Certainly, if you would like to speak, we'd love to hear you. Katie will be monitoring the questions in the chat. I did want to make reference of one more thing, if you don't mind, Katie. We heard from our teachers that in order to pivot, especially when we're trying to do report cards, additional time might be necessary for planning. So in addition to those 3 days, the 27th, 28th, and 29th, we're trying to allocate an additional 2 more days, which are customarily our Wednesday touch point days with our kids. And do I seem to remember that we were looking at tentatively those additional touch point days being the 13th and the 20th as giving our teachers additional time?
Yep, that is correct.
Oh, good. So if you'd like to ask a question, we see a couple of coming inside the chat feature. That's fantastic. And I did place the survey link inside the chat feature in case you didn't get a chance to complete it. If you have multiple kids at the IC, we'd ask if I could trouble you to please complete 1 survey for each child within your family. So what do we know, Special K? What do we got? What are the...
So we have a question related to positive cases. So how many positive cases have there been in K2? And then when a positive case arises, what actions were taken?
Thank you. Great question. I don't know if Brian Johnson is on the call tonight. Brian, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Brian, would you be willing to share an overview of the question that's been raised? And while you do that, I'm going to pull up and present our data dashboard to our families who are on the call. Katie, could I trouble you to, there we go. And Brian, would you mind answering that question for us, please?
Yeah, so I don't have the specific actual numbers of individual K2 students who've tested positive since we've come back, but we do keep all of our data on the data dashboard that's more district-based. And then kind of in addition to that, I think kind of the follow-up was, or it might have been an additional question is, what's the procedures of coming back? And so it does connect to, making sure that you're now out for 10 days as Public Health Madison-Dane County. That's their new criteria. And we are they do have a kind of a clarification that it could be 7 days with a positive test or 10 days without. And our recommendation is really just 10 days. So 10 days to be out from that standpoint on. And so I think Steve has it brought up that we're keeping track of positive cases within the district between students and with staff. And then that's updated every week. And so the data is live and it keeps a cumulative data as well of that have occurred since the summer that we've been keeping track of all of that information.
Thank you. The follow-up question to that would be, so if there is a possible positive, and what needs to happen if a class needs to quarantine? For example, if that's occurred at the K2, like what has that plan looked like?
Yeah, so we would meet as a team, and right now our school nurses are our contact tracers. And so they've been doing an incredible job of really tracking who meets the criteria for having to isolate and go into quarantine from that standpoint on. And so really it's anybody who's been within 6 feet of that individual for more than 10 minutes. And so if they've met any of that criteria, the school nurses are investigating that student, and then they're making the determination for who needs to quarantine from that standpoint forward. And so if we get to a point where we feel like it's a whole classroom, we would also do that in consultation with Public Health Madison-Dane County. They would also provide us information, help support in making some of those decisions.
And maybe it would be helpful just to share with our viewers tonight that we have some resources on our district's website that helps us manage those very kinds of questions. So if you were to go to mounthorpeschools.org and just scroll down, you'll notice that along the left side here, we have information not only about our protocol, which we had just been sharing with you, our dashboard, which we had just been sharing with you, but the protocols. what would we do in certain circumstances? And every possible scenario, I can't imagine we've been able to capture every possible scenario, but what we have found is the most frequent circumstances, and then responding in such a way that's commensurate with the recommendations of Public Health Madison-Dane County. You can find that information just by clicking the links on our district's web page. I'm hopeful that that helps to answer the question that's out there.
Yes, thank you. The next question asks, what is the number capped at for students in a classroom? And I believe, if I am correct in answering, maybe Brian Johnson, you can verify, but it's really related to the distancing aspect. Given the physical space, how many students are able to be in there, students and staff, with distancing? Is that accurate, Brian?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. The guidelines base it on the 6 feet distance, not on the number of individuals within a location or in a space. And that's because schools are considered government entities and buildings. And so when you see public sites having a maximum number of people within a certain area, we fall outside of that because we're government buildings and government entities. And so that's why we're different than a restaurant or another location within the county.
Thanks, Brian. The next one, maybe Dr. Salerno, they're asking about a possibility to on-ramp at a later opportunity, maybe when an older sibling's able to go back, or maybe when the Dane County numbers come down a little bit.
Oh, I can absolutely appreciate that. Maybe not everyone's ready to join in person or feels compelled maybe to return to the virtual setting. We want to provide another opportunity for families to do that. My best guess is that would likely happen sometime around the fourth quarter. And there's a couple of reasons for that, because of the logistics in keeping that class size as favorable as possible in terms of teacher-pupil ratio, but then also to mitigate the impact it has on students being bounced between different teachers. And so we want to be very thoughtful about on-ramping and off-ramping. In fact, those of you who have children in K2, if you don't mind me putting a plug right now about that survey, there is a survey going on right now asking this very question. Would you like to continue in the current pathway, or would you like to explore something differently? So if you don't have that survey link, let me know and we'll be happy to send it your way.
The next question relates to what will the days look like when the students are not coming to school? If they're choosing the in-person learning track, what will that look like? And the truth of that is that's still something we are working on based on numbers. Our K2 worked really hard to come up with a strong program. And if we follow that model, that would be something where we check in with students for a morning meeting every day on the off days. And then we would provide live related arts. And then we build on some independent learning for our other content areas that would follow what they did with in-person learning. And so it's could very likely be a mix, but one of the things that we'll be looking at, depending on what our numbers are like, is what we would be able to provide specifically in our setting. We have a question about recess, wondering if that will still be grouped. And yes, when we start, we will also be sending our students out to recess in cohorts. Now, what that will likely look like is having different areas on the playground to play in, depending on the day and if it's first recess or second recess, and then developing a schedule where students will be able to move through all of the zones throughout their week at school. And one of the things, if I can put a plug in, is we would anticipate that with the snow, we're going to have zones in the snow. And so making sure our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders are coming with their boots, and if they want to play in the snow, their snow pants, so that we can be successful at keeping our groups. distinct out there at recess. Precautions for maintaining distancing will be with our both with our PBIS teaching our positive behavioral expectations, as well as our phenomenal recess teachers who do such a great job working with students and supporting them to follow the rules. One of the things that we are just we shouldn't be surprised by, but are just so pleased to hear is when we're talking with our counterparts who have had students back, they've said students know the routines. They've been doing such a phenomenal job following them, is that we really do think we'll be able to count on them to follow those expectations, and we'll be sure to teach and reteach those expectations so that all students are able to be successful. All right, a question for, will students be live streamed into the classroom for instruction? If so, how often or what is the frequency of this? As I've touched on, that is something that we still are finalizing. Well, we're collecting our numbers so we can finalize it. We've had some advocacy for our students who need to remain fully virtual while they there might be a family need for that the own child's desire would be that they could come back to school, and they really wish they could. And so we've had some advocacy to have our fully virtual students paired with some of our fully virtual staff. And if our numbers support that, we would love to make that happen. Another piece of the many social emotional needs we're trying to balance. What would virtual look like if we choose to stay virtual? Will it be the same weekly schedule as we've been operating on? It will be the same or possibly just a little bit different. One of the things that our director of instruction is been in touch with us that we're going to meet with staff who will be doing our fully virtual platform and seeing if now that we're midway through the school year, if there are any tweaks to it. We would not expect large changes, but being halfway through, wanting to take a look and seeing if there are needs that we need to address and small changes we need to make there. Another question, if we're willing to be flexible on days, is it assumed siblings will be kept together, AABB? So yes, that is one of our priorities when we think about how does the IC fit within the whole district system, is we understand that families need to have reasonable schedules to keep track of, and that we need to schedule students on the same days as their siblings. And so, yes, Rachel Johnson has been in communication with us if there were any exceptions to that due to special circumstances, and we will work to maintain that as well. And Dr. Salerno, is that true for the 6-12? That's something we want to maintain throughout the grade levels.
Yes, absolutely. Wherever we can be as consistent as possible, we want to try to do that.
All right. So we have a clarification question, acknowledging, okay, we know if we have symptoms that we need to stay home, is a test required to return to school? Dr. Salerno or Brian, would you be able to answer that?
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, we are not going to require anybody to have a test to be able to return. It would just need to be the maximum amount of days then that you would need to quarantine before you'd come back.
And so
we would of course like individuals to get tested and go through that, but we can't mandate that anybody would have a test being taken.
And it would be a matter of being fever free for the specified amount of time, correct?
Yep. Yeah, because those areas still are in play, as well as the maximum number of days, because you could develop symptoms for up to 10 days after an exposure occurs. So.
All right, thank you. Looking through the questions, I think we've hit on a couple of them. A question about what happens if my child is on an in-person plan and they need to quarantine or isolate for 10 days. Does he still get asynchronous learning during that time? And so as we are finalizing our plan, what we look to are some of the models that are the model that our K2 has done as a good example where, yes, we still provide some touch points for that student needing to stay home and have them tune in for those morning meeting, the number corners for the live related arts where possible. And so we'd look to maintain that. We could not replicate everything if in the same way as being in person, but we would also want to support that learner at home. All right, the question is related to numbers in Dane County and Mount Horeb. With numbers being high, why is February 1st the target transition date with other places with in-person learning are now looking to go into a strict lockdown, such as the Netherlands? And so, Dr. Salerno, would you be able to speak to kind of Dane County Public Health and why they, as best you know, are recommending that schools are able to open even with high numbers right now?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, because that's one that often keeps me up at night as well. And every time I visit with Public Health Madison-Dane County, this very question is raised either by myself or other superintendents who are on the call. We visit with them, by the way, weekly, and we go into this recommendation cautiously optimistic that the latest research coming from Harvard University and other well-vetted research arms indicate that the risk of exposure amongst our youngest is almost non-existent. The real risk, if there is a risk within our buildings, happens to be with adult-to-adult exposure. And so we've set aside some protocols that reflect what we are asking our staff to do. And in fact, we've trained them in that with a series of video podcasts. And every once in a while, we have to update those protocols as evidenced by what the requirements are coming out of Order Number 11. Our Board of Education approved a gradual reopening plan, which you'll find on the district's website. And the board said that they would be prepared to do as Public Health Madison-Dane County recommends. And at this point, their recommendation is to return students to school in person and continue to offer virtual pathway, provided a number of caveats are met, the protocols of which I spoke, but then also a gradual return as opposed to trying to bring everybody back all at once. Why February 1st? Because we're hopeful that after the holiday break, if there are people who chose to disregard the recommendations with regard to travel, we'll be beyond that quarantine period. Moreover, we'll be even better prepared in order to meet the demands of our families who might have transportation needs and the like that would allow us to properly and adequately prepare for our kids' return. And then, of course, coming close to the end of the first semester, and with our teachers working so hard to bring closure to the first semester, bring report cards to a close, but then also allowing for a gap of about a week to occur. We believe February 1st was kind of that spot that would be of probably prime opportunity for us. Now, should we see numbers go extremely sideways or Public Health Madison-Dane County change their position, then we will be prepared to pivot as well. We would never want to put our kids or our staff in harm's way. But as of right now, it appears as though that we can continue the planning that's been occurring around this. I'm hopeful that helps provide some context. maybe last thing on this is to say that for families who aren't comfortable, I absolutely respect that. And that's why we're really committed to providing a robust or rigorous curriculum delivery system in a virtual format for our students and their families.
Thank you. We have a question related to will there be an attempt to keep existing class cohorts together if those parents align on their response to in-person or virtual learning? And again, we spent a lot of time building relationships and supporting that community building within our classrooms throughout the year. And so we will work hard to maintain those where possible. We also understand that some of those important relationships are also with peers. And so we'll be working with our teachers, and families can contact me if needed. But we will be looking to maintain those relationships as much as possible. But that's really kind of where our survey gets back to. We need families to let us know their top priority. Is it that my top priority for my student is that they're back in school? Is it that my top priority for my child is that they maintain virtual learning? Or is it another factor such as a current teacher placement or peer placement? Now, throughout the pandemic, many puzzles have become a really big item. Many people are finding some entertainment in those large jigsaw puzzles. And so at the IC right now, we are gathering our puzzle pieces, and we'll try to put it together as best as possible. But there will be limits to the requests we'll be able to honor. And it is not because we do not want to, it's that we've got to get that 5,000 piece jigsaw puzzle to come together and have it come together by February 1st. And so we will do our best. That's why we are gathering information from you all at this time. But there will also be pieces that are just not possible, and we'll try to minimize those as much as possible.
You know, Katie, if you don't mind, tangentially, as I look down the list of questions, there's another one that says, has it been determined which teachers are already expected to teach all virtual? And the answer to that is no. To your very same point, Katie, is that we will be building our master schedule upon what you need. There's an assumption that everything is constant with all of these moving variables. And one of the things that we would encourage you not to think about is that every variable is constant. We still have staff members who are debating whether or not they need to take leave. They take this decision very seriously. They care deeply about the kids, and they really worry about taking the leave. They don't want to, but they know that in some circumstances it's just beyond them and they have to make that decision. And so they're struggling, and rightfully so, because they care deeply about our kids. So to your point, Katie, we'll do everything we can in order to accommodate every family member's request, but there might be a variable that we don't even know about yet in order to help us get to a yes. So I'm asking, again, for everybody's grace, everyone's patience, everyone's understanding that we may not get everything we want. And so please know that now is the time to start having some conversations with your kids about the fact that this might be a new opportunity to try something differently. We did get some feedback from parents in kindergarten through second grade, despite giving a timeline much like the one Katie shared, that they were surprised that they didn't get everything that they wanted. And we felt really bad about that because we don't want our kids to be put in a circumstance where they're having to cope at a time of great change. And so in our letter, we provided to you some resources for you to start having some conversations to set the table with your children when it becomes apparent that maybe we may need to be flexible in what occurs here in the next couple of weeks. So I'm really grateful for the questions. I'm seeing we have a couple of more, and I do want to be respectful of everyone's time here. When I look at the clock, I'm seeing we're at about 5:41. I'm wondering if maybe we answer one or two more questions, Katie. And then for those who want to hang on for an extra couple of minutes, we'll hit the bonus round. How's that sound? We'll answer a few more questions, and then we'll call it a night, okay? Katie, what you got there?
All right. So maybe more of a clarification, but we have a parent asking, can you explain how to request that your students across or different age children go get on the same schedule? And let me clarify, that's our default, where we will schedule siblings across schools and grades on the same schedule. That is our goal for all families. And it was really the survey question that was asking kind of the exception to that. Does your family have flexibility if we as a school are looking for ways to balance numbers? And so if you're hoping that your children are on the same schedule, that's our plan. That's what we will put in place. And then there is a question saying, now we know that the intermediate center plan will have some differences compared to the K2, but as someone who might not be familiar with that plan, can you fill me in a little bit on that? And so our colleagues down at the Early Learning Center and the Primary Center really put together a strong program there where 2 days a week, maybe a student in the first 2 days who are attending Monday, Tuesday, they're attending with their teacher and their classmates for 2 full days with reading and literacy, math instruction, writing instruction, doing the morning meetings, getting out to recess, getting to PE, doing a guidance lesson with Miss Running. And then, so their days are pretty full on those in-person days. Wednesday, remember, that will be a day where it will be an asynchronous day for all students, regardless of the model, where we check in virtually with that classroom teacher for about an hour in the morning, do some of that morning routine, morning meeting, and then review with students what that independent learning would look like. And so that students are able to complete their work on their own during that day. Because that release time is really, really critical for staff as we navigate this whole new way that we're teaching and are adapting and modifying curriculum so that we're able to provide as rigorous and as strong of instruction as we can, but also while we're totally reinventing the model, we're providing it in. And then for that student who went to in-person days on Mondays and Tuesdays, that means Thursday and Friday would be primarily asynchronous days. Our K2 counterparts did come up with a great solution where students who are at home or at daycare on Monday or on Thursday and Friday, they are still able to live stream in with their teacher and the classmates who get their turn in school to do a morning meeting, to do the number corner routine, and start their day in a way that feels familiar to them and have some contact with that teacher. And then from there, they move on to one or two related arts that they participate in virtually, while the rest of the day, to my understanding, would be independent learning where they're able to continue on with what they did in school earlier that week. So hopefully Sarah Straka will jump in if I missed anything, but I think that captures it. I will share our timeline again. If you need a reminder, we've got the survey out to families right now. We'll copy it into the chat again. This is the 3 through 5 survey that we are really, we'll be messaging out to families the importance of getting that back to us by the end of the day on December 30th. So that we are able to build the program that our families need. Let's see if I got that copied right. Dr. Slern, I might have to have you put the survey in because it's copying kind of funny from the chat.
Yeah, I think it should be in there again for folks. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All right.
And so, Katie, if you don't mind me also mentioning, one of the other linchpins to all of this is staff. We know that because some staff members are indeed struggling with that decision that we referenced before, we're really going to need substitutes. We're going to need people who are willing to go into the classrooms and help cover for those individuals who might have to take leave for their own health conditions or that of a loved one. So if you don't mind a commercial, so to speak, as people get ready to jump off the call if they need to go, because I know we only said we were going to go to about 5:45. The commercial is, if you know somebody who just really has a love for kids and would like to be of a service mindset to others, we're always looking for paraprofessionals. We're always looking for custodians. Food service, school nutrition folks, they're one of the lifelines to our district's success, and we need you. Not to mention those of you who have training in working in teaching with kids, we're going to need you. And so we ask that if that's something that you're interested in learning more about, maybe I'll go ahead and share my screen real quick so that you can get a look at how to make that happen. So hopefully you can see this in a moment. Please hold. Yeah. And so my friend and colleague, Sarah Eartham, is on the call tonight. Sarah can be reached at 437-7034. We're always looking for bus drivers, custodians, school nutrition, as well as paraprofessionals. There might even be some room for administrative assistants. The rate that you see here is our per diem for our teachers, those who are licensed to teach. Or maybe you have a loved one who's just completing their certification program here mid-year. Won't you please refer them to us? Our application process is on a website called WECAN, W-E-C-A-N, the Wisconsin Education Career Access Network, and really look forward to seeing folks be referred to us so that we can hopefully realize that vision of getting us back to school with our children on February the 1st. Maybe this might be a good time just to allow for a break and allow people who needed to jump off the call to get to other meetings tonight to do so. And then we'll take another couple of questions that people might have. And while that's happening, if you have an additional question, feel free to either type it in the chat, or if you hover down below, this is so cute, there's a little raise hand button down below there too, that if you have a comment that you'd like to make rather than hearing us talk on, we'd love to try to answer your question as well.
All right, one that we didn't get a chance to get to, but let's say a family elects for in-person, but an event or concern necessitates their family to pivot to all virtual. How would that be handled, or would that be allowed?
Great question. We see the pathway off hybrid into all virtual being a ton easier than it would be vice versa. And so we would work independently with each individual family to try to find a way that mitigates the changeover for your student. And provided that it's a must-have in terms of health conditions, we're going to do everything we can to set your child up for success. Don't you worry about that at all. We want to make certain that your kids are successful. Well, how about other questions? Anyone? Principal Hauge, I think this is the gifted and talented group. They've done such a great job asking thoughtful questions, and I think you and Brian have done a really nice job of answering them.
I can maybe, Steve, if you don't mind.
Please.
I know I've gotten this question via email a couple of times, and so maybe if I can just say it to the group too. The question that I have gotten from families is, if my child has an IEP and they've already been getting Virtual Plus instruction, but we're not at a place where we can feel comfortable having them come to school in the hybrid type model. Would we still be able to get the virtual plus instruction, kind of the really small group with the special ed teacher? And the answer to that is that we're going to still have some formation of virtual plus. It will look different. It could look different. We'll work with the special ed teacher and the family. And again, that's one of those decisions that's based on once we have all the data after the survey's gone through. But we're going to do everything in our power to continue to give the services to the kids that most need it. And so something will continue in that realm, just not, I can't guarantee that if you've been getting Monday and Tuesday from 9 to 11:30, that it'll stay Monday and Tuesday 9 to 11:30. But we'll work with families and with teachers and get back to individuals around that area.
A really great point, Brian. Thank you for remembering to insert information around the needs of our special education students. You know, I anticipate that this is not the only time for questions. There'll be lots more opportunities for you to raise them. By all means, feel free to give us a buzz or shoot us an email. Like I said before, no question is too silly or too small. If you have ideas and suggestions about what might make the experience a little easier for you and your family, know that we are all ears. This is the first time any of us has really been through this. And we want to be as responsive and as customer service, if you will, friendly as possible. I know that we have absolutely the best and brightest minds around this. I'm grateful for the people who work in our schools. The love they have for our kids, your kids, is beyond measure. It really is. And I'm just thankful that you would take time here on a Monday night in the middle of a winter break. With that being said, maybe we'll bring the conversation to a close. If your friends maybe missed this call tonight, I have recorded it, and I will be sure to put it on our district's YouTube channel as soon as we're done here tonight. All that being said, I wish you all a wonderful close to the holiday season, and please send your kids our very best. You really make me so very proud to be a Viking, and I hope you are too. Take care now, everybody. Have a good night now.